He was a feminist icon. He was regarded by many as a potential Democratic presidential nominee. There's not a progressive cause that Eric Schneiderman didn't embrace wholeheartedly and then attempt to impose by force on the people of New York State. Schneiderman was an all-purpose left-wing activist. He was especially an aggressive advocate for the Me Too movement. Watch.
We must reimagine a world where predators are exposed and held to account, and survivors are supported and empowered at every level.
It really was a culture of male supremacy, said Eric Schneiderman, and liberals nodded in their bovine way. They loved all of... Watch this.
It's a bird. It's a plane.
I'm Eric Schneiderman, and I'm the Attorney General of the state of New York.
Are you going to lead us out of the darkness?
The state attorneys general are going to be the first line of defense.
Eric's Justice League has challenged Trump over the first travel ban, pesticides, student loans, the second travel ban, smog, methane, Obamacare subsidies, DACA, the third travel ban, trans rights, clean power plan, and birth control access. Whew.
We're going to save ourselves together.
You're going to save us.
We're going to do it. But that requires a lot of people other than state attorneys general getting engaged.
Please be my hero.
Well, tonight, Samantha Bee's hero is disgraced and unemployed. Reporting by Ronan Farrow released last night suggests that in private, Schneiderman was exactly the kind of predator he claimed to be hunting. 4 different women accused Eric Schneiderman of hitting, slapping, and choking them. 2 said they later sought medical treatment for what he did. Some allege that Schneiderman made death threats against them. One says he threatened to have her followed or her phone tapped. One former girlfriend, who is Sri Lankan, told reporters that Schneiderman, quote, started calling me his brown slave and demanding that I repeat that I was his property. Schneiderman's many friends on the left didn't stick around long once the New Yorker piece came out last night. After pausing to make certain that Schneiderman's career was really dead, former allies have come out to denounce him and say how horrified and shocked they are by the allegations. They can't believe it. Please. As with Harvey Weinstein, a lot of people knew Schneiderman was not at all what he pretended to be. There are plenty of signs of that, some public, and some people said so out loud, including Donald Trump in a famous tweet 5 years ago. But the left stuck with Eric Schneiderman anyway until the last possible moment, as they always do when political majorities are at stake. They'll put up with anything for the sake of power. Principle be damned. Consider this detail from the Farrow piece. Quote, after the former girlfriend ended the relationship with Schneiderman, she told several friends about the abuse. A number of them advised her to keep the story to herself, arguing that Schneiderman was too valuable a politician for the Democrats to lose. If you can even imagine. And of course you can imagine, because once again, like the obedient little robots they are, self-described champions of women fell into line to protect an abuser of women, just as they did with Ted Kennedy and Bill Clinton and countless others. Hypocritical? Of course it is. Is it surprising? No. These are the same people who fly their private jets to global warming conferences, the ones who bring armed guards to anti-gun rallies. These are the people you see on television lecturing you about diversity from the safety of their gated neighborhoods that look like 1950s America. Advised her to keep the story to herself, arguing that Schneiderman was too valuable a politician. Are you really shocked that they covered for a violent abuser who became famous for denouncing domestic violence? Probably not. It's a familiar script. Tomorrow, bet money on it, they'll be blaming Schneiderman's abuse on high school educated men in flyover country. It's their fault. Toxic masculinity. It's a nationwide problem. That'll happen. But before it does, let's be sure to get to the bottom of this particular story. Who knew about what Eric Schneiderman was doing, about what kind of man he was? Did New York Governor Andrew Cuomo know? How about New York Mayor Bill de Blasio? Or how about Senator and self-proclaimed Me Too leader Kirsten Gillibrand? All of them supported Schneiderman for years, just as they supported Bill Clinton and Teddy Kennedy and Harvey Weinstein. They've gotten a pass for all of that. This time it's worth getting to the bottom of their complicity in this, if any. Tammy Bruce is a radio show host in New York City. She's thought a lot about this, and she joins us now.
Hey there.
Hey, Tammy. So how long before Eric Schneiderman's alleged abuses become the abuse of all men? This is really a macro problem. Shouldn't we pause before we shift responsibility to everyone and ask who knew about this specific guy?
Yes, I mean, look, this is still, it's sinking in. It is so horrific. It's one thing to be arguing about sexual harassment and treating women badly or unequal sexual harassment and treating women badly or unequally in the workplace. That's bad enough. Yeah. These are stories of physical violence, of domestic violence, which has not been dealt with a great deal when it comes to the Me Too movement. And a man who was law enforcement, I mean, the Attorney General of the state.
Right.
And it's an extraordinary dynamic. And we know that these issues transcend politics and parties. But what's fascinating here is that these are men, whether it's Harvey Weinstein or Bill Clinton or the Kennedys or now this man, who wrapped themselves in the cloak of the Me Too movement, of feminism, who said that they were the champions for women, and ended up being the man that they were warning everyone about. And the problem is, as you mentioned in the Ronan story, is that for women on the left, liberal women, have been told and effectively conditioned that you've got to effectively give up yourself in a way in order to be able to help the movement or help the liberal narrative. That ironically, these women were told by their friends the argument that we want to fight to protect women, that we are going to protect a man who is violent toward them. There's got to be, this is one thing to expose them, but liberal women have to ask themselves, what other lies have we been told? What other things have we been told to how to behave? What we should sacrifice ourselves for? And here's the other revelation here, Tucker. Schneiderman expected, in some ways, we believe, to be part of Hillary Clinton's administration. Weinstein, in some reports, of course, was her best friend and very close to her. The thing that has made all of this possible to come out, besides Ronan Farrow's great reporting and other individuals as well, like Jane Meyer in this report, is the fact that Hillary Clinton lost. If she had won, all of these people would have been still protected, and they would have still been victimizing women in many industries, but certainly this upper crust of the liberal framework with men and the women that have protected them would have continued to victimize women. And now we're at a point where it's about, really, I contend, in this framework, this largeness of it, is that it's about the liberal ideology that the right has been so demonized that you've got to protect everyone in your realm, because it's the right and conservatives who are supposed to be the deadly ones.
I think that's
it's your own victimizers there on the left.
No enemies on the left. I've seen this all my life. But
yeah.
And you're absolutely right to say that there are creepy people on both sides. That's for sure. But there's one strain of this behavior that really is particular to the left, and that's the overweening hypocrisy. We're all hypocrites, I get it. But the idea that the guy who's telling you you can't have a wood stove because of its carbon emissions is flying in a private jet, or the person who says you can't have a gun has an armed bodyguard, or the Me Too activist is beating up women, normal people wouldn't be that hypocritical without hating them. Like, normal people couldn't do that. They'd be like, you know what, I'm going to pick another issue. I know I'm beating up women, so I'm not going to be like the Me Too spokesman. But liberals do that again and again. Why? What's that about?
I would contend that they don't believe in the issues. Any more than Barack Obama cared about your health care or getting rid of nuclear weapons or ISIS. These are mechanisms for their own power. They use them. And on the left, you get protected because you've already convinced everyone else that you're not the enemy. So I don't believe it's hypocrisy, because to be a hypocrite, I suppose you have to kind of sort of believe in the issue and then do the opposite. They don't really believe in it. And this is our problem, and that's the liberal problem now, is that has this just been a game? Does no one believe in the issues? And for the women that have believed in it, let this at least hopefully maybe be a crack. You want a broken glass ceiling? It is only happening because Hillary Clinton lost, and now there's a chance for liberals to be honest. And maybe it's the Kanye West theory. Maybe they can have freer minds, which will lead to safer lives and genuine independence, which is what liberals and conservatives, all Americans, genuinely want together. We can stop alienating ourselves from each other and come together for the things that we have in common.
I've said it before, you're a very deep person. Tammy, thank you for that.
Thank you, Tucker. I appreciate it.
In public, Eric Schneiderman expressed particular horror at the allegations that Harvey Weinstein coerced women with threats to keep them silent. Here's a selection.
Women were coerced into facilitating Harvey Weinstein's misconduct. Sometimes they were targets themselves. If they refused, they were threatened with insults. Their careers were threatened. They were threatened with physical intimidation and violence. The conduct really was shocking. We have never seen anything as despicable as what we've seen here.
Wouldn't you hate yourself if you were him? I mean, really, as you were saying that? Now, of course, we have allegations that Schneiderman did exactly the same thing, and other members of the New York political establishment may have covered for him. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says that Schneiderman's fall shows that nobody is above the law. Right.
This nation has a chronic, disturbing, disgusting behavior of sexual harassment against women. If it's the President of the United States, if it's the Attorney General of New York, nobody is above the law.
Did you get that? It's not my close political ally and friend Eric Schneiderman has a problem with abusing women, for which he resigned yesterday. It's America has the problem. You are the problem, not Eric Schneiderman. That guy shot up a school, but the fact that you have a shotgun in your closet is the real problem. We're all at fault here. Right. Okay. Joining us now. Sorry, I lost control. One of our favorite people, associate editor at the Washington Times, Larry O'Connor, joins us on set. So that is a tell right there. That they're going to leverage the Eric Schneiderman story, not to give rest of us like reason to examine what they're actually doing. Yeah. But to turn it around on the rest of us.
For Andrew Cuomo to actually see this as an opportunity to attack Donald Trump is beyond despicable and politically crass. And you're right, we can't need to riff off of something Tammy was saying, and you're right, it was so deep and smart. I feel like the progressive left thinks they have a get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to treatment of women. As long as they support the right of women to abort unborn children, everything else, all bets are off. You can do whatever you want. And frankly, you know, over the last several decades, they've learned that lesson properly because the women's organizations, National Organization of Women, NARAL, Planned Parenthood, they've practiced that, what they preach, frankly.
Ted Kennedy killed a woman, an adult woman in her 20s called Mary Jo Kopechne in 1969, and upon his death, he was celebrated as a feminist hero.
That's right.
So you're absolutely right. It's all about that. But what I just find amazing is that we never stop to ask the obvious questions when it's someone on the left. It's like, how did this happen? Did no one know that this guy was a creep? I've gotten 5 calls today from people, not with hard evidence, but saying, yeah, I mean, this was kind of widely known. There's something really wrong with Eric Schneiderman. Do you really think Cuomo didn't know?
I can't imagine. He's a close political ally. They share offices in Albany, right, in the Capitol building. And he's been a huge supporter of his. You're right. He was on his route to be the next governor, if not a candidate for president of the United States. And we saw this after Harvey Weinstein. Remember, in Hollywood, suddenly it was an open secret. Oh, well, we all knew about it. We all knew about it as if, what, that's okay? As if we can just move on. But comparing it to Harvey Weinstein for a moment, you know, the other thing that's very disturbing about this is that these victims were afraid that Schneiderman would use the power of his office against them, to tap their phones, to imagine Harvey Weinstein with the power of the state behind him, with the power of police investigation to go after an innocent human being, someone that is being victimized by Harvey Weinstein. That's terrifying. And I'm old enough to remember when the left actually pretended as though they were afraid of the surveillance state, that they actually didn't want the government to have that kind of
because
power.
They didn't have power then, and they actually did a nice job brushing back the surveillance state, but now, of course, they endorse it. Larry, that was great.
Thanks, Tucker.
Great to see you. Thank you. We want to go now to the news. We have results to report in tonight's primary election, and Martha McCallum is here with the details. Hey, Martha.
Hello there, Tucker. We do have a couple of races that we can report tonight. Fox News can now project 2 winners in Ohio this evening. Tonight, Republican Mike DeWine will face off now, we know, against Democrat Richard Cordray in the race to succeed term-limited Governor John Kasich. Now, DeWine, who has a long history in Ohio, he's a former U.S. Senator. He's been the AG twice, also been a congressman. Longer back than that, he has now defeated the lieutenant governor to John Kasich, Mary Taylor, who distanced herself somewhat from Governor Kasich during the course of this primary. Everybody's, you know, trying to sort of align themselves as an outsider candidate in most of these races. But Mike DeWine, who has a very solid reputation in the state, will be the one to take on Cordray. Now, on the Democratic side, Cordray, the state's former attorney general, has beaten former Congressman Dennis Kucinich, well known to Fox viewers and people across the nation. He was once the youngest ever mayor of Cleveland. Long history in Congress. He has lost his race tonight to Richard Cordray, who was the head of the Consumer Protection Finance Bureau and very closely aligned with Elizabeth Warren. So he will take on Mike DeWine against Richard Cordray in the Ohio governor's race. We can also project that Mike Braun, who came into this race as the outsider businessman, sort of a bit of the Trump aura around his candidacy to some extent, he has won the Senate primary in Indiana. So he's going to face Kucinich, well known to Fox viewers and people across the nation. He was once the youngest ever mayor of Cleveland. long history in Congress. He has lost his race tonight to Richard Cordray, who was the head of the Consumer Protection Finance Bureau and very closely aligned with Elizabeth Warren. So he will take on Mike DeWine against Richard Cordray in the Ohio governor's race. We can also project that Mike Braun, who came into this race as the outsider businessman, sort of a bit of the Trump aura around his candidacy to some extent, he has won the Senate primary in Indiana. So he's going to face off against the man who is considered perhaps the most vulnerable Democrat senator in the country in Indiana, where President Trump won handily. Now, Mike Braun will go up against Joe Donnelly in that spot. He defeats two sitting congressmen, Luke Messer and Todd Rokita. And the dynamic between the two of them was kind of similar to what we've seen in West Virginia, where you have two current politicians sort of duking it out. Very nasty race against each other. Mike Braun emerges as the winner there. We're still waiting on some more indications on how things are going in West Virginia, Tucker. And as soon as we get some information about the Blankenship race against Evan Jenkins and Patrick Morrissey, which has just been fascinating to watch, we're going to get some numbers there. We'll bring them to you as soon as we do.
Martha McCallum, thank you for that. Headline, Dennis Kucinich. Fox News alert. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has arrived in North Korea for summit talks. Amazingly, one of his goals is to possibly secure the release of Americans held captive by that rogue hermit regime. We'll follow the story, obviously, where it leads and bring you the latest. President Trump has repudiated the Iran deal today. Will that help prevent war or bring us closer to it? Analysis next.
Tucking generations of families for 150 years. That's the power of Pacific.
Years after President Obama negotiated it, the president has promised to kill this deal for a long time. He talked about it a lot on the campaign trail. He won the election, so no one should be surprised that he did it. When the deal was created, it was negotiated, by the way, by two groups, Iran and the Obama State Department, neither of which had America's interests at heart. So it's hard to feel too sad about the death of the deal. Still, you have to wonder what it means. Will it take America closer to war with Iran? And if it does, are we prepared to fight that war? Or does it make lasting peace more certain? Michael Anton was a national security official in the Trump administration. He's just re-entered the private sector, and he joins us tonight. Michael Anton, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
There's certainly no defense of the deal, which I took as a matter of faith was negotiated in bad faith and not on behalf of American voters. But you got to kind of wonder. Here, Ambassador Bolton goes into the administration, and almost immediately there's a missile strike against Syria, and the Iran deal is scuttled. He has said repeatedly that he would like conflict with Iran. So the question is, are we moving toward that?
I think just the opposite. In fact, what the Iran deal did is it gave the Iranian regime a windfall, first a cash windfall and then a business windfall.
Yes.
By lifting sanctions, by allowing countries that have long wanted to do business with Iran back in. Germany, especially the UK, France, all started enacting commercial contracts with Iran. We've seen the Iranian GDP go up, and Iran's spending on ballistic missiles, on terror financing, on destabilizing activities, on continuing wars in Yemen and Syria, all of that rose since the Iran deal went through. By reimposing sanctions, which is what getting out of the deal does, it will reduce the amount of resources that the Iranian regime takes in, and it will reduce their ability to spread mayhem and chaos, and it will reduce conflict and the likelihood of war.
Conflict with the United States? I mean, because I think maybe at the core of this is the question, I understand that Iran is a rogue nation and doesn't like the United States, but if you were to list a sort of hierarchy of nations that threaten us, would it be on that list?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the top nations on that list.
How many acts of Iranian-sponsored terror have we had in this country in the last, say, 20 years?
In the last 20 years? Well, there were, in this country, harder to say, but against U.S. interests that the Iranians have either backed or been involved in, there have been many. They blew up a dormitory in Saudi Arabia, the Khobar Towers. It's a famous case in 1996 that killed almost 100 Americans. They probably, we believe, trained and maybe even provided the explosives to the al-Qaeda terrorists that bombed the embassies in Tanzania and Kenya.
Yes.
We know the 9/11 Commission showed that they facilitated transit for the 9/11 hijackers. Bin Laden's own son lived in Iran for a time being.
Yes.
Documents that were captured when bin Laden's home was raided in Pakistan that the Obama administration refused to release because it would paint a very dark picture of Iran and harm the possibility of getting the deal. The Trump administration finally released, and it shows Osama bin Laden on the record saying to his followers, you got to work with the Iranians. They hate the Americans as much as we do. This is a necessary and useful alliance, even if we have our differences. They're the great Satan, and we basically agree with that. We can work out our own differences later.
That's a compelling data point. I would agree with that. I think it's really interesting. It hasn't received enough attention. McMaster, though, was for keeping the Iran deal, correct? Am I misstating that? No,
I think you're misstating that. I think that there was a consensus in the administration that the deal was bad. We would give our European allies a reasonable chance to fix it. The president agreed with this, and the president said it in his January statement. If people can come together, if these nations can come together, fix the flaws, he'd be open to staying in. What you saw the action here today is that didn't happen. And look, I would say to the critics who say that President Trump was always eager to get out of the Iran deal, he certainly was, I think, eager to get out of it or fix it. But it's telling that we're now, 16 months into this administration, and he didn't do it on day one.
No, you're absolutely right.
He gave every chance to all parties to come together and see if he could make this thing better. And I think 16 months is plenty of time. It didn't happen, and he kept to his word.
Michael Anton, you make a good case. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Britt Hume is Fox's senior political analyst. And by senior, we mean senior and wisest. And he joins us tonight.
No, you mean ancient.
No, I don't actually. I mean, when there's something genuinely perplexing, you were the first person I think of to explain it.
That's a little frightening, but thank you.
But so to you, the question is, how much change will this mean for us in the United States? Does this have effects that most Americans will feel?
Well, we don't know, because we don't know how effective we'll be able to be in reimposing sanctions without the participation of the other countries that were in the alliance that brought this treaty together. This executive agreement together.
Right.
So it could turn out that America's able to put really punishing sanctions back in place, and that the Iranians will react to that, maybe by becoming more bellicose, maybe by becoming less. No country that's going to try to be a big player on the world stage can afford to have a collapsing economy. So that's a fact. You need to be able to finance all this stuff. And of course, the argument that's made, of course, Tucker, is that Iran got so much up front. Stuff that's already out the door that Iran is enjoying the benefits of, as your previous guest Michael Anton mentioned, that getting out now doesn't really hurt them that badly, because much of the benefit is already accrued. That all remains to be seen. What I think it does show, Tucker, is the fragility of big international agreements that are not treaties. Now, lots and lots of executive agreements are made by presidents with other countries, usually not on something this major. And of course, that meant that all it was an agreement between the previous president and the Iranians and the other partners in the deal, which means that this president had the option that he is today exercised, which is to renounce the deal and reimpose the sanctions.
The Obama people must be furious. I mean, they really spent a lot of time, effort, and I would say brushed aside critical American interest in order to get this deal.
Well, remember, this was the reason, of course, why it isn't a treaty. Is that the administration knew there was no chance in the world that it could pass the Senate, which, by a significant enough margin, if any margin at all, that it could be put into effect. So they did it the only way they could. And think of this, Tucker. He did a lot of things with his pen and his phone. A lot of regulations were imposed. A lot of things domestically were done, and they're all falling apart now.
Yeah.
So it's
They were not permanent victories.
No,
so and we're still getting the results of the primaries tonight. But as you're watching so far, what we know, is there a pattern that emerges?
Well, it looks to me like, so far at least, we're talking about Republicans who are going to oppose Democratic incumbents in several states. Right. So automatically you need a fairly formidable candidate to beat somebody who's already got the office. In Indiana, it looks like they've got a reasonably formidable candidate. Mike DeWine in Ohio, although you look at him, you think, well, who's that little guy? Well, he's actually been a very effective and successful politician for a long time in the state of Ohio, so he'll be a formidable candidate for that seat there. Of course, everybody's mesmerized by West Virginia, because you got this wacky guy, who's fresh out of a stretched crossbar hotel, who is believed to have some chance of actually winning that nomination, which, of course, a lot of people think would repeat the whole Roy Moore fiasco they had in Alabama, where the candidate who couldn't possibly be elected gets nominated.
Just for our viewers who may be confused by the term of art you just used, a stretch at the Crossbar Hotel means he just got out of prison.
Yeah, I thought that vernacular was reasonably well
so
done.
Good. Britt Hume, it's great to see you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Well, more and more Americans are concluding that the Mueller investigation may be motivated by politics rather than a search for justice. Can the investigation continue while preserving its legitimacy? We'll speak to a House Democrat about that next. And you can see why they might conclude that. The Democratic Party seems to be agreeing with that interpretation and adding to it. Recent fundraising emails from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee have lied about the investigation itself. They've claimed that if the party can collect 1 million signatures, it will somehow force President Trump to give testimony to Mueller's investigators, because that's how it works. Congressman David Cicilline is a Democrat representing the proud but small state of Rhode Island, and he joins us tonight. Congressman, so if the whole point of this is to ferret out untruth, because we care about truth, then why would the DCCC be claiming that signatures can force the president to testify?
Well, look, I don't work for the DCCC. I don't do their emails. But I think the reality is the majority of the American people have confidence in Robert Mueller. They want the investigation to be completed. They want it to continue uninterrupted with any political interference. And they want to find the truth out, whatever it is. And I think, frankly, if we just allow the investigation to continue, wherever the facts lead us, let Robert Mueller share those with people. This is a serious investigation. It's led to 23 indictments, 5 guilty pleas, conclusions that, well, you laugh, but it's true. Most people think that's serious.
Because the majority of the people who've been indicted are foreign nationals who will not show up for trial,
Tucker,
and nobody has been
even... But it's not a joke. You know,
no, it's a joke because this
You actually don't think it's a joke that there is a serious investigation about Russian interference in the American presidential election that has led to the indictment of 23 individuals, 5 guilty pleas.
For interference in that election, has any American been charged with collusion with Russia? No.
They're not done. But there have been Americans.
No, that it's dishonest to cite those indictments as evidence.
To say that has anyone been charged with collusion? They are not finished. All I'm arguing is allow the investigation to continue.
Hold on. I'm not trying to impede its progress.
Okay,
merely,
and we agree.
Because I care about the truth, which is why, hold on, the DCCC, from which you take money, has written this. We need to gather 1 million signatures.
I actually don't take money. I contribute money to the DCCC.
For Robert Mueller, well, you're participating in an endless cycle here.
My point is, Tucker.
No, but hold on. Do you agree with that?
No, listen to me. I told you. I think this is a serious investigation. I don't think it should be politicized in any way.
Then why is the DCCC politicizing it?
I don't know. I'm not responsible for
you denounce them.
No, it's not a question of denouncing your membership in the party. No, I won't renounce my membership in the party. And you know why? Because Democrats are attempting to focus our energy on the things that matter to the American people.
You're raising
families' incomes, reducing the cost in people's lives, making sure folks are prepared for jobs in the 21st century.
By the way, if they were doing that, I would vote for them, actually.
That's what we're doing, but you won't talk about it. You have me on the show to talk about Russia. Well, have me back to talk about the Democrats' economic agenda of raising family incomes, reducing the cost in people's lives, preparing folks for jobs.
This is
a better deal for the American people.
This is a sincere question. If you think that those are the preeminent issues in America, and I agree with you 100%.
I think they absolutely are.
And unlike almost every other show on cable TV, we do segments on that a lot.
I know, you never include us. Invite me for one of those segments.
Let me ask you, will you look into the camera and say the Russia investigation, more than a year long, finding no evidence so far of collusion, is impeding the progress of coming to solutions to the questions that are wrecking the country?
It should not be impeding.
But it is.
But the problem is because there has been so much effort to impede, interrupt, undermine, diminish the investigation. Allow the investigation to continue. It's serious.
Hold on.
Put it aside. Let them do their jobs. These are professionals. And focus on the issues that matter to the American people.
Hold on. When you watch Adam Schiff from California say on television that the Trump campaign colluded with a hostile foreign power, do you think that puts the focus back on economic issues where it belongs?
Listen to me.
Like, what the hell?
When asked questions about the investigation, obviously I'm answering your questions. What I'm saying is Democrats are focused like a laser on economic issues, on dealing and addressing the economic anxiety. You know what my constituents care about? Who's going to create good-paying jobs? Who's going to raise incomes for my family? Who's going to make sure that I have the skills necessary for the jobs in the 21st century.
This is literally Orwellian.
No, it's not. Because Republicans,
your leaders of your party talk.
No, here's the problem, Tucker. Republicans benefit from talking about the Russia investigation because they have no accomplishments to talk about.
Look, I actually think, on the one hand, you're sort of right that it does help Republicans, but this is being driven 100% by the left, and to say otherwise is dishonest.
Not true.
That this investigation is not driven by the left.
Here's what I'll challenge you.
They demanded a special counsel.
Hakeem Jeffries and Sherry Bustos, the three co-chairs of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee, to come on here and talk about the economic agenda that we put forth, a very bold agenda. Talk about our infrastructure plan, our plan to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. Talk about those.
I must say, part of you must feel shame for saying things that you know are not true.
No, they are true.
The Democratic Party has driven this Russia investigation from day one. What do you mean it's not true? I live here.
We
I cover
want
this
the
for a living.
investigation to be completed. We want the independent counsel to have the resources.
Okay.
You're the one who talks about it all the time.
Yeah,
I'm happy to talk about the economic agenda of Democrats.
I'm not even annoyed. I'm just amused by how ludicrous this is. But
you couldn't be more wrong, Tucker. Democrats are
we're out of time.
focused on the issues that face the American people.
They're not talking about Russia at all. We're just imagining it.
No, you're talking about it.
It must be me.
Did you invite me on to talk about Russia?
No. I mean, I just imagined collusion where there was none. Let me apologize to you, America, for making up this false issue.
Let the investigation be completed and find the facts wherever they are.
Yeah, wherever they are. All right, Congressman, thank you so much. I appreciate it. More and more illegal immigrants are dashing across the border, affecting our economy. We do this every night for a reason, because we care, and some of them seem to have no respect for American laws, maybe by definition. A member of the Border Patrol will describe the state of play tonight, and it's going to be an interesting segment. We'll be right back. Well, you think violent criminal gangs, you think young men, but like lots of institutions in this world, MS-13 has become more inclusive. In El Salvador, women are banned from MS-13. They are seen as unreliable gangsters. But in the U.S., it's different. Prosecutors in the D.C. area say they're finding evidence that more and more girls are joining MS-13 after arriving here in the United States. Meanwhile, illegal border crossings have surged more than 38,000 in April. That's the highest total of the Trump presidency so far. Brandon Judd is president of the National Border Patrol Council, and he joins us tonight. Brandon, thanks a lot for coming on.
It's good to be with you. Thank you.
So, to what extent is illegal immigration driving the MS-13 scourge?
Illegal immigration has everything to do with MS-13 that we currently see in the United States. When these individuals cross the border illegally, they're coming here to look for different types of work, and a lot of that is in the criminal enterprise, which is MS-13.
So, MS-13, the country's deadliest gang, fentanyl, heroin, crystal methamphetamine, all coming over the border, our southern border. So the rate of illegal immigration is a direct effect on safety. So given that, what is it? It seems to have spiked. Why?
Well, if you look at when President Trump took office, there was this huge drop, and it was strictly based upon the rhetoric. Everybody believed that if you crossed the border illegally, you would be detained, you would be held for your deportation proceeding, and you would be sent back to your country. I know you laugh.
So they're watching CNN abroad, and they actually believed it.
They did. They did believe it, which is what you saw this huge drop. But what the American public expected was the American public expected Congress to get behind this president who did such a great job in causing this drop. But Congress didn't act, our agencies didn't enact the policies that were necessary to detain these individuals, and so we've seen this huge spike, and this spike just continues to go up. Ever since April of 2017, month by month, we've seen more and more illegal crossings, which puts a lot more pressure on myself as I patrol the border and the agents that patrol the border.
So in one of those weird ironies that happened only in Washington, Congress justified its lack of action in part by citing the drop in illegal border crossings.
You know, what's funny about that is the Democrats continue to cite that. They refuse to acknowledge that we have this increase in numbers that are coming across. But what's funny about that is if any party should want to secure the border, it would be the Democratic Party, because year after year they get beaten up in election after election because they refuse to secure the border. And the American public wants the border secured. And when you talk about securing the border, that's one of the reasons why when President Trump calls for a wall, it allows us, Border Patrol agents, to dictate where the illegal crossings take place. It allows us to be a lot more successful. So if Congress would actually step up and do their job, give the Border Patrol agents and the president the resources that they need, we will secure the border.
Well, and if you cared about poor people in America, you'd want to eliminate illegal immigration because they're the victims of it. It's rich people benefit from it. They get cheap housekeepers, but poor people suffer.
Well, I mean, we lose jobs to illegal immigrants. When I was in college, when I was at Arizona State University, I worked for a company, Tempcon Concrete. And, you know, I didn't get paid a whole lot of money, but I felt a lot of satisfaction in the job that I did. I would leave the job site and I would see the job that I did. The vast majority of people on my crew were illegal aliens, and I had to compete for that job.
And it lowers wages, obviously. Brandon, thank you for that. It was really interesting.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Kanye West tweets about President Trump are still reverberating like a boulder in a pond. One man thinks it's more interesting than you may realize. Jason Whitlock, one of our favorite guests, joins us after the break. Rapper Kanye West has proven himself the equal of really anyone on the planet at dominating public discourse with just a few hundred characters on Twitter. 2 weeks ago, he tweeted this, quote, "You don't have to agree with Trump, but the mob can't make me not love him. We are both dragon energy. He is my brother. I love everyone. I don't agree with everything anyone does. That's what makes us individuals, and we have the right to independent thought." Well, that was a bomb that went off, and he's been under attack ever since. What does it mean? Take 3 steps back. The Kanye interlude. Can we learn something from it? Jason Whitlock has been watching carefully. He's an anchor at FS1. In a recent op-ed, he called Kanye's statement, quote, "one of the best tweets of all time." He joins us tonight to explain what he means. Jason, what do you mean by that? Why is it one of the best tweets of all time?
Well, I think what Kanye is trying to do is open Black America's mind to the fact that perhaps we've chosen a bad strategy by swallowing all of the Democratic Party and liberalism whole. I say in my column in the Wall Street Journal that in the immediate aftermath of the civil rights movement in the 1960s, Democrats marketed to us liberalism as the solution to all of our problems. And liberalism now is like the cigarette. It's been marketed us the same as the cigarette. Fashionable, sophisticated, it's supposed to be liberating. But I think it needs a Surgeon General's warning, hazardous to your family and all the values you were taught as a child. I think us as African Americans, we have to examine, why are we the only ethnic group that has gone in wholly with one political party? No one has to compete for our votes.
Exactly.
We are chained to an ideology that just isn't working over the last 50, 60 years. Liberalism, the swallowing of it whole. Our families have been destroyed. Our children lost and confused. Our Black men incarcerated and emasculated. And we've moved away from the traditional values that have always defined us. I think we've made a mistake.
Well, the thing about politics is if you give your vote away for free, you don't get anything in return. And so maybe the hysterical reaction to the Kanye West tweet is the reaction of a party that knows that once people figure that out, like, it's got a major problem on its hands. So you need to tamp down any independent thought immediately, or else it could get out of control.
And it's being tamped down as viciously as anything I've ever seen. You know, when they call in the great writer Ta-Nehisi Coates, basically, I call him the overseer of Black thought. He's there to keep everyone in line with the groupthink that the only solution is liberalism for Black America's problems. If that were the case, our problems would be being solved much faster, because 95% of us are afraid to even admit that we have conservative values, and we've moved away from our church upbringing. We've been the most religious people in America for years, hundreds of years, and we're moving more secular. We're moving away from the church. Our religion now is liberalism, and the Democratic Party is our church, and it's just not working for us.
So if Kanye West, who's like not just one of the most popular Black Americans, but one of the most popular Americans just across the board, if he doesn't stand a chance of just raising this question, because it's a totally valid question, then who does?
Well, actually, he does stand a chance, because when someone like Kanye speaks out, he creates space for others to speak out. Because anybody that has said, and you got to, Tucker, I'm a non-voter. I don't really like politics much at all.
I can see
but
why.
If you just say, you know what, I think Trump has a good idea here, you get kicked out of the Black race. Kanye's saying, I don't agree with everything Trump believes in. Kanye